All right, we are live. Just to let you know, Mr. Miller, your project is probably going to be about 40 minutes out.
Okay, great.
Awesome.
Good. I call to order. I would like to call to order City of Lake Worth Beach Historic Resources Preservation Board meeting Tuesday, October 11th, 2023. Roll call, please.
Elaine DeRisso, Laura Devlin. Here. Robert Lorenzo.
Here.
Jamie Foreman. Nadine Heights. Ed DeVoe.
Here. Ed
LeBlanc. Here. You have a quorum.
Thank you. May we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Additions, deletions, reordering, and approval of the agenda.
We will be reordering the new business to have a zoning training before what is listed as item C.
Thank you. I need an approval of the minutes from the September 13th, 2023 meeting.
Make a motion to approve the minutes from the September 13th, 2023 meeting.
I got a motion. Can I get a second, please? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, passes unanimously. Withdrawals or postponements,
Nope.
consent, or disclosures. I had a conversation with Mr. Miller regarding fee. We were discussing another property and it came in the conversation, so I do have to disclose that.
What was the nature of your conversation and can you?
We are both realtors and it was regarding another property that he had listed.
You can remain unbiased. In the
I
hearing
can remain
today.
unbiased in that, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, for disclosures, any disclosures from anyone else? No. Okay, new business. HRPB 2300100221.
Before we get to that, did we miss the swearing in of staff and applicants?
Oh, I forgot, sorry. It wasn't on. Will we get the swearing in of staff and applicants, please?
Please stand and raise your right hand if you plan to give testimony. Do you swear and affirm the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, say yes.
Yes.
And we'll get those online.
Online,
Yeah.
Mr. Miller, and
Yes.
I,
can you turn on your video?
we need
for 1
you
second?
and Megan to turn on your videos and unmute both of you if you're gonna testify.
It says the host has stopped my video.
We're working on it.
Okay.
Let's see.
It should be good now.
There we go.
And Megan.
Megan, we need to see you receive
Okay,
blurry right now. There we
There you
go.
go.
Perfect.
Do you swear and affirm the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, say yes.
Yes.
yes,
Awesome. So I'm going to put you back on mute, Mr. Miller. And then Megan is here for the first project, so we'll leave her on.
Robert, can you go ahead and turn off your video while you're waiting?
Awesome. All right, so we have new business item A. This is a consideration of a COA for roof replacement as well as an unreasonable economic hardship at 415 North Ocean Breeze. So this is a contributing structure in the Old Lucerne National Historic District. So here we got it. It's on North Ocean Breeze, just a bit north of 4th Avenue. So for property history, this is a wood frame minimal traditional building built circa 1938. The original design did have galvanized metal shingles, and from what we can tell, these are still the original ones on the building right now. The structure overall has retained a high level of historic integrity over time, which is part of the reason why it is on the National Register in our historic district here. So what the applicant is requesting is to replace the existing metal shingles with light gray dimensional asphalt shingles. And this request is also accompanied by an unreasonable economic hardship application. So in terms of preservation, these sorts of metal shingles were really common amongst these wood frame minimal traditional houses. I know some of our board members who have been here before have heard about these on other properties. What makes them unique, they were common at the time, but currently they are pretty rare within our city. So previously, when we've tried to look for them, we were able to find maybe like 15 in all of our historic districts. So the way that our design guidelines are set up is to protect, rare contributing features like a metal shingle. So in our design guidelines, the appropriate replacement that staff can approve at a staff level is new metal shingles. But because of limited options of metal shingles that meet our wind code, as well as the expense of a metal shingle, previous board direction and direction as well from the state office is that we can take economic hardship applications for a light gray dimensional asphalt shingle as a potentially appropriate replacement option. So typically, we are looking for something like a new metal shingle. We found, I believe it's 4 companies that make one that meet our Florida wind code. And part of the reason that we have this direction from the State Historic Preservation Office to use a light gray asphalt shingle in the case of economic hardship is because it replicates the appearance visually a little better. So you can see here, they were typically light gray galvanized metal. And so what we're looking for in this case is to replicate the idea of having that repetitive small shingle in a light gray color rather than like standing seam, which is very vertical and has, a very different appearance than a shingle. So the unreasonable economic hardship application was submitted per, board direction. We did not publish any of the materials, but you do have a printout of what was submitted in terms of the applicant's economic state. So basically, this is a pretty common thing to have in a historic preservation ordinance to prevent, cases of unreasonable economic hardship for a property owner where they can't, use their property. They can't do something like replace their roof because they can't afford it. So we've got this concept of alternative remedies also in our unreasonable economic hardship section of our ordinance. And that's kind of what we're looking at tonight. So if you determine that there is an economic hardship here, that alternative remedy is what we're talking about with the board direction and the SHPO direction in terms of using those asphalt shingles as a replacement. So it's not compliant with what staff can approve, but what you guys are here to do tonight is to determine if there is an economic hardship. And if you do determine that, we've included some conditions of approval in your staff report to do that light gray asphalt. And so we've got the applicant's daughter here. She's on Zoom if you guys have any questions for her.
If you'd like to just give us a little, if you'd like to talk, she's more than watching.
I'm having trouble hearing. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, so my father needs to get a new roof, but however, the metal is very, very expensive and it's also very hard to find. And the difficulty of installation, I've heard from several roofing companies. So we're just looking to hopefully get the asphalt approved because it's time for a new roof.
Can you talk about the request is for an economic hardship? So can you talk to the board about, maybe your father's circumstances? Because we
Yes.
And that's kind of what's in.
Okay, so he is retired. He was a Lake Worth police officer in the 70s and 80s, but he's on a fixed income of Social Security. I help out as much as I can. He does have several health issues. heart disease, kidney. So the medical bills on top of the roof, it's just a lot. So that's the reasoning for the hardship. I'd like to keep him there, but he is required to get a new roof. So the asphalt is the best we can do at this time.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions? I mean, I'm very familiar with the house. I drive by it 100 times a day. It's 2 blocks from mine. I used to live on that block. I know who that is.
Oh,
It is hard in our city, in being east of federal and now with all the rules and regulations with our insurance, so.
So staff doesn't provide a recommendation for economic hardship, but, I mean, I will say that, you know, typically when economic hardships have been granted by the board in the past, it's typically for, a lot of times for folks that are elderly and on fixed incomes. So
Yeah.
that's a common,
Right.
that is a common request that has been granted.
The metal roof is approximately 2 to 3 times more than the asphalt chicken. Well. Up to the board, if you have any more discussions.
Yes, hi, this is Laura Devlin. You mentioned that if the roof needs to be replaced with metal shingles, that you said earlier that you would like to keep your father in the house. Is that implying that if this is not approved and the metal shingles need to be put on, that would
Well-
create a hardship for him?
right. Well, the homeowner's insurance, Citizens, they require it because it's over 50 years old to keep him covered. And, you know, I'm trying my best to help him out, but, you know, the estimate for just the metal alone varied anywhere between $25,000 and $30,000. And that was just a quote. So that's just kind of out of the price range right now. So that's why we were hoping we could get approved for just the asphalt shingles. It's a small home at a fraction of the price. It's 14,000 to 15,000 as a quote. But then of course, once you get under there, there's probably some boarding and things that need to be replaced. So it'd probably even be more. So yeah, he's required to do that for his insurance. And Citizens is the only one that will cover a home this old in Florida. So I've been told by several insurance agents.
Mr. DeVoe, put your microphone on.
Oh, push the button.
Thank you.
No, push the button on the base. There you go. Right in the middle. Well, below it. There you go. I think.
There you go.
Thank you. Yes, sir. I'd like to make a motion to approve. For the hardship condition. And, so. I'm
That
going back
would be
to
with staff recommended conditions of approval.
back page.
On the back page, there's a note.
Annie will pull it up for you.
I got it right here. Well, I move to approve. Oh, I move to approve. HRPB project number 23 dash 00200032 certified church certificate. I will put that approximately broken. I quote this, I'm sorry. COA for roof replacement with asphalt shingles due to reasonable economic hardship. For the property located at 415 North Ocean Breeze, based upon substantial evidence and staff reports and pursuant to the city of Lake Forest beach land development regulation and historical preservation requirements.
I'll second.
And I just want to confirm, is that with the conditions of approval? That's with the light dimensional shingle and no modifications to the structure. Those are the 2 recommended staff conditions.
Say it again.
So the 2
Yes,
staff conditions
The
are,
staff condition, yes.
Okay.
Okay, and we got a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Passage unanimously.
thank you, Megan.
Thank
Be
you.
in touch.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
All right. Where first? Very good, thank you. say it or you want to start it? HRPB project number 23-001-00216.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Good evening. For the record, this is Yan Tarafa, Preservation Planner at the City of Woodward Beach. Item B is a consideration of a COA for 2 historic waivers for swimming pool in the front yard and minimum requirement front setback for the structure located at 401 North Lakeside Drive. Next slide, please. I got it. So this is located west side of North Lakeside Drive between 4th Avenue North and 5th Avenue North. It's in a single family residential district. And here, this is the site plan. The house was built in the 1920s. It's in Mission Revival style. And if you can see on the east of the lot, that's where they're proposing to build a swimming pool. And then if we look out on the west side, you can see that there's a 1-story structure. This is actually the garage. It was also built at the same time as the main structure. And they're proposing to build the swimming pool in the front yard. So these are the waiver requests. The first one is to have the proposed swimming pool inside of the 20-foot setback. In the LDR, it's required to have at least a 20-foot setback, but here they're proposing 13 feet. And also in our LDR section 23.1-12, it says that any accessory structure can be in front of the main structure. It has to be next to it or behind it. But here they're proposing the swimming pool to be between the street and the principal structure. So this is a photograph showing you on the left, the front of the house, where you see the gate and the house. That's where the swimming pool will be located. And then on the right, you see the back of the lot. This is where you have the garage. You can also see like the driveway. That's where the back is. So they don't have enough space to build a swimming pool there. So for staff to review historic waivers, we need to look at 4 different criteria. The first one is being if the modification is compatible with the neighborhood. And in this case, in the historic district, it's not common to see a swimming pool in the front. But there's the structure, the garage, the historic garage structure that's there that we'd like to maintain. Therefore, they're proposing in the front. And also the applicant has suggested to put fence and also hedging to cover the swimming pool from the public right of view. And therefore, staff believes that it meets the criterion. The second one is looking at if there will be any visual or audible impact in the neighborhood. And here again, the fence and the hedging will cover the swimming pool. And also they're proposing to put the mechanical equipment outside of the setback, therefore it would limit the noise. So we look at the third. If we look at the third requirement, which is if it's detrimental to public health and safety, and the swimming pool in the front won't cause any public health concerns. And the last one is to look at if the modification is the minimum necessary requirement to, for reasonable use. And even though staff don't believe that it's a reasonable requirement, I think it's a reasonable use to have a swimming pool in South Florida. And also by allowing the swimming pool, we are able to preserve the historic garage in the back. So to conclude, staff recommends approval with conditions. And the following slide will show the 2 conditions that we proposed. And the next slide is the potential motions. Thank you. And the applicant is also here.
Could I ask you that?
Yes.
So your standard fencing or in the front of the home is 48 inches. That's adequate for a pool in the front yard.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm just saying pool height fences and
Mhm.
fence fences and all that. So the 48 inches is fine.
Yes, sir.
And it's not like, I'm just. It's not like front yard pools, but we did one on 10th Avenue in Lakeside.
Mhm.
There's one on Golfview, I can do off the top of my head. So I mean, they are sporadic throughout the city where we have allowed them in the
Yes.
front yard.
Correct.
We have, because we do have some odd development patterns where we have construction in the rear and then the front yard acts as the backyard.
Correct.
And so historically, even for variances, we've kind of had the position that it's South Florida. So even though they haven't lost all reasonable use of their property, what we say is it is a reasonable expectation that you may want a pool, and we would like to keep our historic structures, and then so rather than having them demolish a historic accessory structure, we would prefer to see the pool in the front yard than the demolition of the structure.
And it's a beautiful home. They did a beautiful remodel on that and through the house.
It is a beautiful one.
I don't know which one of you are the owners, but very nice job.
How do we get to the fence height? Who determined that?
The what?
The fence height,
That's in the code.
That's your vote.
Mhm. Yeah.
48 inches.
that's your plan there.
Front.
The front ones, yeah.
So, I mean, you can do a lot with landscape, and most people, do fine. I mean, I know in my house, my cottage, I had a 4-foot fence in my front yard, and you really couldn't see. I had a ton of privacy because I had the landscaping layered and I had hedges, and it was a very private yard. So you can do with what you can do. We're blessed with a year-round climate, and a year-round growing season. So you can have really continuous privacy here with landscaping and however you want to put that in.
We could increase that to 6 feet.
No,
No.
the fence.
And that's for security for to keep the house going.
Yeah. And we try to keep the fencing very, very consistent, and the part of that is one. It just never works out, in the long run to do a bunch of waivers to fencing, because then somebody has something and somebody doesn't have something.
Right.
And then it gets, but the other thing too is there's always been a feeling to keep our rights of way very, have a lot of vegetation. So what happens is when you approve a lot of 6-foot fences right adjacent to the right of way, and you don't follow the code, which is if it's 6 feet, it's set back with a landscape buffer, or it's 4 feet with the landscape in the front, is you get kind of a view down the street of, plastic PVC fencing, as opposed to a more natural view where you have tropical landscaping. And so it provides for a different, it provides for a different neighborhood experience over time.
All right, I have a couple of questions.
Yes,
The 6-foot fence versus the 4-foot fence. We know that applies to the front yard, but this house is on the corner on the 4th Avenue side. What's the regulation for the fence there? Is that a street side? It's always gonna be 4 feet?
yes,
Yeah.
To the house, right?
yeah, so.
So-
go for-
So, we have a regulation for 4-foot fencing in the front yard. So typically, most of our lots have a minimum required 20-foot setback, and I'd mentioned that. So typically, we measure that front yard, 20 feet in from the property line. So anything that's in, let's see if it'll let me draw a box. No, it won't. Anything that's on the front property line or on those side property lines for the first 20 feet, that's all your 4-foot fencing area. This side yard, that because it faces another right of way, we've got 4th Avenue North here, they can do 6-foot fencing along this side, but it has a minimum 30-inch setback and a landscape screen. So doing some of what Aaron was talking about there, providing that vegetated, right of way, but they can do some 6-foot, starting, let's say about here, wherever 20 feet is on the property.
So, yeah, and my other question, I think it's actually kind of obvious now. I was gonna ask you to bring up the site plan again, but I can see that it would be almost impossible to put the 20-foot setback of the swimming pool to the front. So.
Yeah.
So if you incorporate that 6-foot thing, you would drop it down to 48 inches.
Yes.
Mhm.
So you would.
So, yeah.
In return, they can, if they want to do it themselves. I'm only concerned, I mean, trust me, I get what they're trying to do. Florida and Florida, but I'm more concerned about safety. And around the corner, you're right there.
So the Florida Building Code really only provides fencing so children don't jump in the pool and kill themselves, right? Which is 4 feet is the requirement. Yeah,
Gotcha.
Mhm.
yeah. So the expectation is that once a child gets to be a certain age where they could scale some type of fencing, is that they wouldn't, it's really little children, for the most part. I mean, at some point, you know, if you're a teenager or an adult, you have to choose not to climb somebody's private fence and drown yourself in their pool. You know what I mean? Like there has to be a decision tree there. You know, like, so, but 4 feet is, that's why the code is.
All right, if the board's okay, want to hear
What is that?
applicant, yes. Well, that's how that works. Somebody's gonna move.
Just to back up what she's saying,
State your name and address, please.
Larry Rowe, 339 Puritan Road, West Palm Beach, Florida. Just for the record, safety is, it's a code, it's gonna be there no matter what, self-closing gates and all that. They already have police hedge around us, that's up around here. You will not see this pool at all. And again, just to get the final inspection on the pool, it will have to be fenced in
Right.
with self-closing, self-latching gates. Standard on all pools, thank God. But it is mainly for little children, like she's saying. All the gates have to swing out so they can't push them in. It's as safe as it can be. And you said something about how far is back. The porch is a really important part of this house, so we can't really get closer to it. It's
True.
because it is a really good house.
It is really gorgeous inside. Outside too.
Any questions?
Any questions, Doug?
No.
All right,
Good, thank you.
thanks. Okay. So we have, any more discussion on it? All right, then, did I get a motion, please?
I move to approve this Historic Resources Preservation Board project number 23-00100216 with staff recommended conditions for 2 historic waivers to allow proposed swimming pool in the front yard and to encroach the minimum required setback for property located at 401 North Lakeside Drive, based on the competent substantial evidence in the staff report and pursuant to the city of Lakewood beach land development regulations and historic preservation remarks. Yes, no, I said it was in there.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second? No second. I have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
I,
Of course. All right, pass it unanimously. Gentlemen, have a good evening.
And I just want to say the staff's been awesome.
They
Like,
are.
I deal with a lot of municipalities in this. Awesome.
Thank
Good
you.
job, guys. Thank
They
you.
appreciate that. Thank you. All right, so we get to go to school for 20 minutes. Here we go.
All right, I'm gonna put on my teacher hat. All right, let's get started. So we talked about your hats in our last training, right? You have your historic hat, you have your building hat sometimes for your building waivers, and then you have your zoning hat. And your zoning hat could be like a waiver like we just saw, but typically it's going to be site plans, variances, sustainable bonus incentives at a certain tier come to you for additional height. Conditional use permits. So if somebody wants to do a new use on their property, on their commercial property over residential development over 7,500 square feet, they need to get something called a conditional use permit. Rezoning and comprehensive plan amendments, both text and map amendments. So we're just going to touch very briefly on zoning. We touched on it a little bit last time, but there's your hat for historic preservation is pretty heavy. And you were already having a big helping of ethics and sunshine law and quasi-judicial procedures last time. So we didn't want to kill you, you know, so we broke it up a little bit. So go ahead, next slide. So just again, some history, right? We're the Historic Resources Board. So kind of the beginnings of modern zoning. You're really looking into the 1920s and where we get kind of modern use, the creation of modern uses, use regulation. There was some stuff that folks were playing around with like development regulations before them, but really what we call modern Euclidean zoning, where we're regulating uses, is really in 1926, and it came out of a Supreme Court case, Village of Euclid versus Ambler Realty, and basically Ambler Realty was trying to sell some property in the Village of Euclid, which was, it's Cleveland. Ohio, yeah, I think it was in Cleveland. And they wanted to put a big industrial development there, and they were a sleepy village because it was extending out of the urban core, and they were like, no, we don't want that to happen. So it ended up in a big fight, and basically it came, the Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of zoning, and that zoning is a valid police power, upholding the health, safety, and welfare of communities. So looking more to with a Florida lens, Florida adopts its first legislation allowing local governments to enact zoning codes in 1939. And then in the 1970s and 80s, there were several big policy legislative initiatives that kind of were the precursors to our current modern land use regulatory environment that we have today. And so a lot of those were environmental policies, because there was a lot of development. You think of what's happening in the 60s, 70s, a lot of development, a lot of filling of wetlands, a lot of things were happening. And there was the environmental movement in the 70s. And so there was pushback to that development. And so it created kind of a new regulatory environment, which ended up in the 1985 Growth Management Act. And this basically is where we get our modern comprehensive planning. So it required local governments to have a comprehensive plan. It required that plan be consistent with the state's comprehensive plan and regional plans, as developed by our regional planning council, which our regional planning council here is the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. I'm sure you've heard of them, and they've made presentations. That's where they come in. And it required that local plans be certified by the Florida Department of Community Affairs. And basically they had a set of rules that they developed, which was now gone, 9J5. Those have now been removed in the 2011 Community Planning Act, but that's another story. But basically on how comp plans should be constructed, how they should be adopted, and a lot of that stuff now has made its way into the statute itself. And then it also required local governments to enact implementing ordinances or land development regulations within 1 year after adopting the comp plan amendment. So what is our comp plan? So go ahead and go on the next one. So our comp plan it's our state required document. It is comprised of chapters, which we call elements. And the elements deal with everything that happens in a city. And the big element that governs what we do here is called the future land use element. And these are the policies and the map that say, what is the future vision and the future development of the city? What is the plan for that? And our land development regulations are the implementing mechanism or the implementing rules of that comp plan. So sometimes you'll see something come back in the future and it will say, okay, we're amending the future land use map and we're amending the zoning map, because those have to be consistent, right? Because we read in chapter 163, it says, statute says those things got to be consistent. So you'll see whatever we do to the land use amendment, we have to do something to the LDRs, and whatever changes that we make to the LDRs or the zoning map, you'll see in that analysis or that staff report, you'll see that we went back and we provided a comp plan consistency section for that change. And so we analyze the comp plan to make sure that what we're doing is centered or consistent with that comp plan, the comp plan policies. So you can see our comp plan future land use element is available on our webpage. Our maps are all GIS based as well. And in addition to our comp plan, we have our land development regulations, which are available online. We also have what's called our major thoroughfare design guidelines. So our major thoroughfares are things like Dixie, Lake Avenue, Lucerne, Federal Highway, 10th Avenue North, 6th Avenue South. And so for development on those corridors, which is predominantly where our mixed use districts lie, we have additional basically guidance that are adopted, their rules on how development should look. So it's basically design guidance for development in those areas. That in addition to our LDRs, which are setbacks, our height and everything, we have other requirements for minimum design standards. These include a 25% requirement for fenestration. So there has to be glass on 25% of the front of a building. Talking about truth in architectures there. So all of this, which is a lot of this stuff is what you deal with on the architecture side, on the historic side, right? So you're looking for architectural compatibility. Well, outside the historic district, we have certain architectural guidance and requirements in this document, and this only applies to our major thoroughfares. So, and I will just add something to note is that outside the single family residential, if you're not in a historic district, the city does not have the right to, is not permitted to review the architecture of any single family structure. It's actually preempted in the statute. So the biggest complaint we get is somebody builds a new house in their single family district and they're like, how could the city allow a house this ugly to go in? You know, that's what we get that. And we're like, we're not allowed to review it. So the only time we can review new construction for architectural compatibility in our neighborhoods is with what you guys do right here. So next slide.
So you're only allowed to review outside the district, not allowed to review, it's not allowed to go outside the district.
So for single family, so you can only review single family inside the district for architectural compatibility. You're not allowed to review outside.
Otherwise, they just need all the codes and threats here.
Right.
Your standard
Right.
code.
And one of the things we're really proud of in the historic district is if you look on some of the new builds on North Ocean Breeze, I will tell you what they looked like when they came in for application is not what they built. And if you drive down that street, you know, those new constructions, they fit right into the fabric of the neighborhood. And they fit right in. So that's one of the things that is really good is that we can kind of keep that flavor of like worth going through our historic ordinance and with our new builds. So, and again, so we've got our comprehensive plan. So we have to adopt and maintain a comp plan. Again, we talked about that. It provides the guide principles and standards and strategies for, you know, future development, economic, social health, parks, you know, transportation, all of that. And then public participation in the development of those plans is required. And so if you were here for our last plan, you know that we always have a lot of public participation in Lake Worth, and we had a lot of public participation in that process. And then that process ended up with our last plan being adopted in 2018. So basically, again, here's our future land use element. It's created by a legislative action. And what that means is it's not a quasi-judicial hearing. You guys learned about quasi-judicial hearings. When it comes before you, you all will make a recommendation to the city commission. But once your comp plan is adopted, it's binding on all development orders. This could include building permits or CUPs, anything like that. And so you all cannot approve something that conflicts with the comprehensive plan. You also cannot approve any variances from the comprehensive plan. So variances can only occur and they can only occur for specific issues as they are laid out in the code. And these can't be variances for uses. You can only do variances for like setbacks and sometimes height and other conditions that are related to a hardship of the property. Next. So again, we talked about LDRs, the LDRs, which is, you can see this is the policy document. It's online, it's interactive. You link to it from our planning and zoning page. And this is the implementation of our comprehensive plan. And then here's the quote from the statute. It must contain specific and detailed provisions necessary or desirable to implement the adopted comprehensive plan. So next slide. You can see our zoning map. And we're really proud of our zoning map. We were one of the early adopters of basically, we adopted our data, our GIS data layer is our official zoning map. So we don't republish it. It's actually our data set. So when we amend our zoning map, we're actually amending the data layer is what we have adopted. So when you look on the GIS map online and you're looking at the interactive map, you're actually looking at the official zoning map. And what's really cool is when you click on a parcel, you can type in an address, you get the future land use category, the zoning map, whether it's in a historic district, is it a contributing property? You get all kinds of information for you, and it's quick and easy. And I know Bob, you're a realtor, so I know you all the realtors we know, once we show this to them, they love it. So next. So components of a zoning district. So again, the zoning district has to be consistent with the future land use designation, the corresponding. So if you have single family future land use, you've got to have single family zoning. You can't change your zoning unless you change your land use. They have to go together. There's always a list of permitted uses. So sometimes we'll talk about this. There'll be some text talking about permitted uses in the zoning district, but we also have what's called a permitted use table, which lists all of our uses that are allowed in the city and the process by which they are approved. And it's a gigantic table. If you want to do some brain damage sometime, I recommend that. That's a lot of fun. Setbacks, height, massing, what we call floor area ratio. If you're familiar, some people say FAR for shorthand. And then impermeable surface for the building, which is sometimes referred to as building lot coverage, and then impermeable surface or impermeable for all surfaces, both building and paved surfaces. Not all cities have this requirement, but we have this requirement here. Some of the reasons are one is health and safety is we have a very old drainage system. And in a lot of our districts, we don't require for single family to have an engineered drainage study. So there's a certain amount of green space you have to maintain to absorb rain. Two, one that helps with water quality. The more pavement you have, the faster your water runs off, and all of our water goes straight into the intercoastal, so that slows water down. And then three, there's a desire to have a very green look, or a look with a lot of landscaping in the city over time, and so that also helps with that. So additional requirements that are in other sections outside the zoning district are going to be parking and landscaping and subdivision, sometimes referred to as platting. So you'll see some of those applications coming that may or may not come before you. You don't get a lot of zoning applications, but you do get some. Go ahead, go in it. So applications are reviewed for consistency with all adopted regulatory documents, including the LDRs and the comprehensive plan. If an application is approved, then a development order is issued. So what is a development order? Is it any order granting, denying, or granting with conditions an application for a development permit, which can include building permits, zoning permits, rezoning, subdivision approvals, special exceptions, variances, or any other official actions of a local government permitting development of land. So again, we talked about this before. Who are we? We're citizens of the board, or we're appointed by the commission. At least 3 of you would have to have professional qualifications, and then so what we're here to do is carry out duties and responsibilities as defined in the city's ordinances. You serve in an advisory role, which is making recommendations on legislative proposals. This would be like comp plan amendments or text amendments to the LDRs or the comp plan. And you serve also in a quasi judicial role, which we went into a lot. And your quasi judicial role is your most common role. And you can see your legislative role, as we said, it's making the law, right? Where your quasi judicial role is where you're applying law. And that's where you get your disclosures, you get your evidence, all of those things that Elizabeth has talked about are when you're wearing your quasi judicial hat. Yes. So again, in staff reports, so we're going to go into this next item. And you're going to see in your staff report for zoning items, what we try to do, as you see, there's usually the summary of the item, the map, and kind of the basic location information, what the ask is, where is it, you know, who's the applicant, all of that stuff is always on that first page of your staff report. Definitely take a look at your staff report, especially for our more complicated items before you arrive. And then we also have on our next page, we typically have it's like the next page or two. You'll have this, you'll see a table like this. And so this was obviously for a really complicated project that had a lot of things happening, right? So, but you'll see that we will do a table of all of your basic requirements with the zoning district that we talked about, our setbacks, our height, all of those things. And when you see text that's in red, it's like saying, hey, look at me, okay? So look at there. And there'll be a note and it'll tell you something. So usually we'll say, hey, this needs a variance. Hey, they need a condition of approval to fix this after the fact. It's close enough that we brought them to hearing, but that they can fix it in what we call minor site plan concurrent with permit. But it's something to grab your attention. So, and remember, we talked about on one of the other slides, you cannot approve a development order contrary to law, right? That's in the statute. So unless something has a variance or a waiver, if you see the red, it needs a condition of approval to change that at permit, because you cannot approve a development order contrary to law. Okay. So next slide. Here's our webpage. Please visit our webpage, our zoning one, as well as our historic one. Down there under guidelines and regulations, you'll see a link to our land development regulations. And you see in the top left, you'll see it says zoning map up there. Just click on the zoning map one day, have some fun. It's fun. It's interactive. So next slide. And that concludes our presentation. So let's get on to your first zoning action, which is going to be a major site plan. Now, this one did not require a concurrent conditional use permit because the total use area for residential was under 7,500 square feet. So that's why you're just seeing the major site plan. So Robert, staff is going to go ahead and get started with the presentation. So hang on, and then we'll turn the mic over to you.
All right, so we are on our last item of the night. This is, like Aaron said, a major site plan as well as a COA for a 6-unit apartment building at 802 North Federal Highway. So this is in our mixed use Federal Highway district, and the future land use is mixed use east. And this is in our Northeast Lucerne Historic District. So here we've got our location map. We're on the corner of 8th and North Federal, big lot here. So a little bit on the history of this property. So in about 1940, there was a 2-story wood frame building constructed. It was used as a garage and apartment. It had some additions over time, but was demolished in 1970. This property has been vacant since then. It was briefly a church parking lot, but mostly it's looked just about like it has in that photo on the right. So some of this stuff you will have seen in your staff report. So we've got some information on the surrounding properties and their uses. For the most part, it is mixed use Federal Highway zoning around it. There is a neighboring single family residential area, and most of the uses are residential. There is also that nearby church that we mentioned. So our proposed site plan, you can see that on the right. We've got the building to the front with 3 units on each floor. They're all 2-bedroom units ranging from a little bit over 1,100 to about 1,200 square feet. In terms of our site totals, they are meeting their lot coverage. They're a teeny bit over their impermeable surface, so we've included a condition of approval to just bring that down a little bit. And they are meeting all of their parking requirements. We've got the parking spaces to the rear here, including our ADA space, and they are also using some of their on-street parking on 8th Avenue North. That is something that they're permitted to do in our LDRs. So we've also got their landscape plan. There's a couple conditions of approval that our city horticulturalist, Dave, has included as well, but for the most part, their landscape plan is compliant with all of the sections of the LDRs. So this is also something that we ask our applicants to include, especially in historic, is this streetscape, to get a sense of how it impacts the surrounding area, how it fits in. So you can see, it is a little taller than some of the nearby buildings, but it is fairly consistent in height with other multifamily residential buildings along Federal. So we've got our rendering here, and this is kind of where you start to see the style that they're going for. Something we ask for our historic districts is that they choose a single style and build authentically to that style. We always recommend that they use one of the 10 that's outlined in our historic district guidelines. The windows on this rendering are a little bit smaller than they will be. You'll see a little bit of a difference in the elevations. That was changed a little bit to meet our major thoroughfare design guidelines. So Aaron mentioned that they have that 25% glazing requirement. So the windows were made a little bit taller to meet that requirement. So we've got our elevations here that shows just that little bit of extra height in the windows. So we've got the front up top and the back on the bottom. You can see there's some porches and balconies. And then we've got our side elevations. So this south elevation is the one that will be facing 8th Avenue North. Then we've got our floor plans. You can see we've got, 3 up top, 3 on bottom. So getting into our major site plan analysis, you've got it all laid out in your staff report as well as attachment A. But as conditioned, we do find that the major site plan request is consistent with our comprehensive plan, our strategic plan, all of the relevant land development regulations, including our qualitative standards, as well as our major thoroughfare design guidelines. So diving a little more into the historic side of things.
Before we go,
Sure.
just for training. So all of the standards that she just listed, we go off. We say quick, oh, this standards. In the back of your staff report, there's an addendum of tables, and it will tell you what each standard is. And you'll see as we're reviewing we will check off, and you can see it will say in compliance, not applicable, or it will say in compliance as conditioned. And so we review each one of those standards.
Awesome. So yeah, getting back into historic, we don't take as much time to go through all of those standards there. Otherwise we'd be here all night. But so for historic, kind of like I was saying earlier, we ask that they design a building that's visually compatible with our districts. We don't tell them you have to build in this style or that style, but whatever style they pick, they need to be authentic to it. And then we also have in addition to our design guidelines, we have in our ordinance, our standards that were laid out in your staff report, looking for visual compatibility for things like height, massing, overall the relationship to the surrounding neighborhood. That's a lot of what our ordinance focuses on. So staff does find that the structure's design successfully emulates a streamlined, modern building, and we believe it fulfills all of the new construction requirements on our design guidelines. So some of the design features that you can see, we've got the flat roof with a parapet. Smooth stucco was, the primary exterior building material for this style. We do have some porthole openings. Oftentimes those would have been windows, but here we've got them on those projecting elements on the front. We've also got those large casement windows, which were a common part of this. So another part of the streamlined modern style is horizontality. So really emphasizing all of those horizontal lines. So we've got some stucco banding. The railings they've shown are, very horizontal in nature, and those projecting flat roofed covered entrances all emphasize that. We did also get a little bit of visual emphasis to the front doors, and just adding a little bit of detail to the facade through some simple raised door surrounds. And then kind of a standard thing that we look for is avoiding long expanses of blank facade on facing any sort of right of way. So we're not staring at a big blank wall. So staff recommends approval with conditions for the COA and major site plan. We do have a whole list of conditions, not just from planning, zoning, and historic, but also from our colleagues in Public Works and Utilities. All of those departments were involved in this site plan review that occurred prior to coming to board. So that's where some of those other conditions of approval come from. So we've got our potential motions here, and then we do also have our conditions of approval listed. We did want to know number 3 of the Public Works conditions is being deleted. It's not necessary to be included. It's already covered in our LDRs, so that one's getting deleted. Otherwise, we have our applicant, Robert Miller, here. Let's see, there we go.
I am here.
And we can hear you.
Okay, great.
How we doing, Mr. Miller?
I'm doing well, Bob. How are you?
Thanks, very good. Board members, any questions for contractors? Or I do gotta say, we've been handing out historical preservation awards for how many years now? 5?
Yep.
And Mr. Miller has won more awards than anyone else in the city. His past projects are awesome. In fact, we referred to his projects this evening in another case. Mr. Miller, I just wondering, are you okay with the staff the conditions of approval on your
Yes, I've gone through them with my architect, and we are okay with the conditions. You did mention that we exceeded our amount for impermeable surfaces. I think we're just going to reduce some of the pool paver size around the pool.
That's what I figured.
It's by like 6 square feet or something.
Yeah,
It
Yeah,
wasn't.
it's pretty minimal. It's
minimal.
Can you speak a little bit about the landscaping plans? And the city is very committed to native trees and native landscaping, and what are your plans for that?
Yes, so when my landscape architect goes through this, they keep native trees in mind. I'm gonna just pull up the table here and tell you exactly what count we do have for native trees.
And the city does have a requirement. I believe it's 75% native planting. So there are kind of some LDRs already in place to prioritize those that, yeah, Dave will be reviewing for.
So the silver buttonwoods are definitely native. We've got 6 of those. The sable palmettos are native to Florida as well. 6 of those, along with the white geiger and the Palaca holly.
Thank you.
Staff, any questions for Mr. Miller?
No?
And,
Sure, yeah. I was a little confused, like, I thought you might have presentation.
no,
I think that staff mentioned that the windows were casement windows. I couldn't really understand from the drawing how those were casement windows. Maybe we could pull that up and take a look at the rendering again.
Sure. No?
we were kind of like line, but I think the case in these buttons.
Yeah,
So that whole thing is a double casement, like what I see on the corner there.
correct.
And the horizontal are just mountain.
Correct. Yep. So it's a double casement with some horizontal muntins added.
And the mountains are required to have a certain dimension or.
They're required to be raised, so not like a flat muntin or an interior muntin. We do require raised exterior, typically triangular or OG shaped.
Yeah.
What may have also been in the style as well is on a few of the windows, there may have been some jalousie windows.
Right.
Right.
So, which we would replace with just a single solid pane of glass. So, but for this one, because it the horizontal muntins added some additional interest. Depending, if they wanted to change it up later, we'd have to look at it. But basically that it would either be this, or there might be a couple places where they might be able to replace it as if it was a, as if it was a jalousie.
Right.
I think that's why I was a little confused there, because they look like the awning windows that you see.
They're supposed to look like the awning windows. That's the point.
I mean, if you look at the condo building on Seventh North, this is H North, the one before that flavor of that architecture. Of that other building up the street from it, I mean. Still look great.
Mhm.
What
Yeah,
else?
and to Annie's point, you know, this style is all about, again, that very horizontality, so very
Mhm.
clean. So the windows, definitely with the Muntins, they add some of that horizontality to the look, you know.
So they're quite, the windows are very large. But nice.
There are a lot of windows.
And but just, Mr. Miller, just for how big is one unit?
Each unit is a little bit over 1,000 square feet of living space.
Nice, so you have a good sized unit with big windows.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, it'll be nice and bright.
And just
And
for
then I think on the elevation in the rear, there actually is going to be sliders in all three upper units, but I think she accidentally put a window on there.
Okay,
So just for clarifications, if you notice right there, both up and downstairs, no, with the balcony, and below it'll match the sliders to the left.
okay.
Where's the code for parking?
Hmm?
The parking.
It was all over the
so that it meets code. So, go ahead.
So the way that we calculate parking spaces is based on, for multifamily, is based on the number of bedrooms per unit. So with these 6 2-bedroom units, we were required to do 11 parking spaces. And when you're in a mixed use or multifamily district, you are allowed to use some of your adjacent on-street parking to count towards your required total parking. They can't use more than 50% of the required. So here, that's why with our 11, we're meeting it with 7 in the back here, and then 4 on 8th Avenue North.
That's, the off-site parking covers the spot. And the handicap spot.
Yep, and we've got the required ADA space right here with all the striping and all that.
Does that code? Does that meet city requirement code? That just is code?
So the parking code is citywide.
Is there a formula for the ADA spaces vis-a-vis the number of apartments or number of required parking spaces?
It's in the building code.
Yep,
It's in the
so
Florida building.
Here is what it is.
We don't know, we don't enforce the building code, so, Robert, do you know off the top of your head what it is? It's like how many, it's like per units, it's like. So
I'm not sure of the parking requirements. I do know that the ground floor units, being that it is over 4 units, are ADA accessible.
More often than not, it's 5%.
Yeah.
I actually would know, because it does this, we should ask him.
All right, we good?
Yeah, I guess that with the fence, I guess it goes to our last case is in that. The fence on the side yard, which is, looks in the rendering like it's gonna be 6 feet tall, so it's set back.
It's gonna be set back and have a landscape screen.
yeah, you can
Okay.
kind of see it on the site plan here a little bit. It's set back here, it just wasn't accurate in the rendering.
But I think you bring up a good point for training is, you know, if you see something in the rendering, make sure you note it. A lot of times we'll note things or we'll have them modify renderings if there's something that they're showing that's really out of scale. Because a rendering is just, you know, really should only be looked at for what the building may look like. And it's just kind of a concept, you know, really you want to look at the architectural elevations. And whatever picture or trees they're showing in a rendering, a lot of times the rendering's done earlier before the elevations are finalized or the landscape plans finalized. So they'll just pick some random trees that sometimes have nothing to do with Florida and they'll stick them there to make it look like it's gonna have trees. So we try to minimize that as much as we can and just, but it does give you a little bit of the idea is to give you a 3D perspective. And ultimately, the architectural elevations govern an approval, not the rendering.
Well, so a lot of times, the availability of three-dimensional trees online is not what we hope for.
True.
It's not a match ever.
All right, so, are we good with no public comment?
Nope.
All right, could someone make a motion, please? Yes.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I got it. All right, I move to approve HRPB project number 23-1, I'm sorry, 014 and 23-001 with staff recommended conditions for major site plan and certificate of appropriateness, COA, to approve, construct, a 6-unit apartment building at 802 North Federal Highway based on the competent substantial evidence in the staff report and pursuant to the city of Lake Worth Beach land development regulations and historic preservation requirements.
I have a motion. I have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Miller, congratulations, sir.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, sir. That's gonna look nice.
I know, this project backs up to my old house, so I'm like, you better do it right.
All right, so.
It'll look good, I promise.
All right. Do we have any additional things that, any fun stuff?
Nope, no fun.
Anything here?
We'll end the meeting.
Okay, all right then, so thank you, everyone, and we can end the meeting and come